Behind the lavish sets and ancient grandeur of this 1954 epic lies a production as dramatic as any pharaoh's court. Featuring a star who fled into hiding, a leading man billed seventh despite playing the title role, a stage name combining two lovers' names, and sets recycled for biblical history. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Egyptian. Fact 1. Marlon Brando went into hiding to escape the film. Marlon Brando was originally cast as Sinuhe, the lead role in The Egyptian, and by all accounts, he should have been perfect for the part. The studio had high hopes, the marketing was already underway, and location filming in Egypt had even started. But just 1 week before principal photography was set to begin in February of 1954, Brando did something almost unheard of in Hollywood. He literally went into hiding. According to screenwriter Philip Dunn, Brando attended a script reading and performed the part absolutely beautifully, but then director Michael Curtiz made a confusing comment about how he could make Brando play a character who switches between hero and villain. Dunn went home to write a memo about the situation, and the next thing he knew, he got a call saying Brando had quit the film. The actor left California for his home in New York City and went on the run, avoiding the studio entirely. At the time, Brando claimed he was ill, overworked, and needed to see his psychiatrist, and he even had his psychiatrist back up his story with professional support. But modern sources reveal the real reason. Brando hated the script, couldn't stand director Curtiz, and especially despised his co-star, Bella Darby, who was producer Darryl Zanuck's mistress and had been given the role despite having no real acting experience. 20th Century Fox was furious and immediately filed a $2 million lawsuit against Brando for breach of contract. The lawsuit was eventually settled when Brando agreed to star in another Fox costume picture called Desiree, also released in 1954, essentially working off his debt to the studio. Fact 2. The title character was billed seventh. In one of the strangest billing decisions in Hollywood history, Edmund Purdom played the title character in The Egyptian, but was listed seventh in the opening credits, appearing below actors who played much smaller supporting roles. To put this in perspective, Purdom played Sinuhe, the main protagonist whose story drives the entire film and who appears in nearly every scene, yet his name came after Gene Simmons, Michael Wilding, Victor Mature, Gene Tierney, Bella Darby, and Peter Ustinov in the credits. This unusual billing arrangement happened because producer Darryl F. Zanuck had absolutely no faith in Purdom as a leading man. Purdom had been borrowed from MGM at the last minute to replace Marlon Brando, and although MGM charged Fox $300,000 for his services, Purdom himself would, only being paid $500 a week. Zanuck viewed him as a desperate emergency replacement rather than a genuine star, and the billing reflected that lack of confidence. The decision was particularly brutal because everyone in the industry knew what it meant. The studio was essentially telling audiences not to expect much from their leading man. Purdom's Hollywood career never recovered from this treatment, and The Egyptian remained the most notable role of his entire career. By the late 1950s, he had left Hollywood and returned to Europe, where he spent the rest of his life appearing in lower-budget productions. The film's credits served as a public announcement that even the studio didn't believe in its own star. Fact 3. Bella Darby's name. Combined two lovers. The stage name Bella Darby carries one of Hollywood's most awkward origin stories, as it was literally created by combining the first names of producer Darryl F. Zanuck and his wife Virginia. When the actress, who was born Bela Wygier in Poland, signed with 20th Century Fox in August of 1953, the studio created her new professional name by blending Darryl and Virginia into Darby, making her a walking advertisement for the couple who discovered her. Initially, both Darryl and Virginia Zanuck sponsored Bella together as a sort of joint project, paying off her substantial gambling debts and bringing her to Hollywood with genuine intentions of building her into a star. Virginia treated Bella almost like a favorite niece, and the two women went shopping together and frequently had lunch as friends. The name Darby was meant to represent this partnership and the gratitude Bella felt toward both of them for giving her this opportunity. However, the situation became deeply uncomfortable when Darryl Zanuck fell in love with Bella and began an affair with her while she was living in the Zanuck family home. In January of 1954, Virginia discovered the relationship through their daughter Susan and immediately threw Bella out of the house. Despite this betrayal, the actress kept the stage name that combined both their names, creating the bizarre situation where Zanuck's mistress performed in his films under a name that honored both him and the wife he had betrayed with her. Fact 4. The producer got lost in his own studio. Darryl F. Zanuck's obsession with Bella Darby reached almost comical levels during the production of The Egyptian, as revealed in an incident recalled by screenwriter Philip Dunn. Zanuck was so eager to see how Bella looked in her costumes that he decided to personally visit the film stills department to review the photographs that had been taken of her. But what happened next exposed just how out of touch the powerful mogul had become with his own studio. Despite having run the 20th Century Fox lot for 25 years as one of the most powerful producers in Hollywood, Zanuck had absolutely no idea where the film stills department was actually located. He wandered around the studio grounds searching for it, growing increasingly frustrated as he failed to find the department that processed and stored publicity photographs for all of the studio's productions. The situation became even more absurd when it was eventually pointed out to him that the film stills department was located right next door to his own private dining room, a space he used regularly. Rather than laughing off his mistake or feeling embarrassed about not knowing the layout of his own studio, Zanuck flew into a rage over the incident. His angry reaction revealed how his infatuation with Bella had clouded his judgment and made him lose perspective on both his professional responsibilities and his own workplace. The fact that this powerful Hollywood executive, who made major decisions affecting hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in production budgets, didn't know where a key department in his own studio was located showed just how much his personal obsession had overtaken his professional focus during the making of The Egyptian. Fact 5. Marilyn Monroe lobbied hard for the role. Marilyn Monroe made a serious push to be cast as Nefer, the seductive Babylonian courtesan in The Egyptian, actively lobbying 20th Century Fox for the part that would have been perfect for her screen persona. The role of Nefer was one of the most prominent female parts in the film, featuring a sultry temptress who financially ruins the main character through her manipulative charm. And Monroe recognized it as exactly the type of glamorous, sensual role that could showcase her talents in a prestigious historical epic. However, Monroe's efforts were doomed from the start because producer Darryl F. Zanuck had already decided that Bella Darby would play Nefer long before any other actresses were even considered. Zanuck was deeply involved in a romantic relationship with Darby at the time, and he saw The Egyptian as a major opportunity to launch her career as a Hollywood star, even though she had virtually no acting experience and had only appeared in one previous film. The role wasn't really open for auditions or consideration of other actresses because Zanuck had earmarked it specifically as a showcase for his mistress. The situation must have been particularly frustrating for Monroe, who was already an established star at Fox and had proven her box office appeal, while Darby was an unknown quantity being promoted solely because of her personal relationship with the studio head. In the end, Darby got the part and received largely negative reviews for her performance, with critics noting her heavy accent made her difficult to understand and her limited acting range showed throughout the film. Monroe, meanwhile, went on to other projects and never got the chance to play an Egyptian courtesan in a lavish Hollywood epic. Fact 6. The star replaced two Hollywood legends. Edmund Purdom earned the unfortunate nickname the Replacement Star in 1954 because he stepped into leading roles abandoned by two of the biggest names in Hollywood within the same year. First, he replaced Mario Lanza in the MGM musical The Student Prince. After Lanza was fired from the production, and then, just months later, he took over the lead role in The Egyptian when Marlon Brando abandoned the project at the last minute, The situation with the student prince was particularly unusual because although Purdom appeared on screen as the prince, the voice audiences heard singing was actually Mario Lanza's, since Lanza had already recorded all the songs before being removed from the film. This meant Purdom was essentially lip-syncing to another actor's voice throughout the entire movie. When 20th Century Fox desperately needed someone to replace Brando in The Egyptian, they turned to Purdom again because he had just proven he could handle a major role under pressure, even if the circumstances were less than ideal. Being cast in these two high-profile productions should have launched Purdom into major stardom, but the replacement label followed him throughout his career, and he never quite escaped the perception that he was a second choice rather than a genuine leading man. MGM's head of production even announced plans to build Purdom up as a star and cast him in 3 more films. But when those movies flopped at the box office, the studio quickly lost interest. By the late 1950s, Purdom had left Hollywood entirely and spent the rest of his career working in European films, never achieving the level of success that might have been possible if he had originated these roles instead of replacing other actors. Fact 7. Props were recycled for the 10 Commandments. Cecil B. DeMille purchased numerous sets, costumes, and props from The Egyptian to use in his epic film The 10 Commandments, which was released 2 years later in 1956. This wasn't just a matter of saving money on production costs. It accidentally created a sense of historical continuity between the two films because the events depicted in The Egyptian take place during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten around 1379 to 1362 BC, while The 10 Commandments is set during the time of Ramesses II, approximately 70 years later in Egyptian history. The commentary track on the 10 Commandments DVD actually points out many of these reused items throughout the film, showing viewers which Egyptian artifacts, furniture pieces, and decorative elements originally appeared in the earlier production. One specific example that's been documented is a Hittite prince's sword from The Egyptian that shows up in the 10 Commandments being carried by an Egyptian royal guard played by Clint Walker, which creates an interesting bit of accidental authenticity since weapons and valuable items would have been passed down through generations in ancient times. Beyond the props themselves, only 3 actors appeared in both films: Mimi Gibson, Michael Ansara, and John Carradine, along with a handful of extras who worked on both productions. The reuse of these elaborate Egyptian-themed sets and costumes made practical sense from a studio perspective, especially since both films were dealing with enormous production budgets and the cost of creating authentic-looking ancient Egyptian materials was extremely high. What started as a cost-saving measure ended up adding an unintentional layer of historical realism to both films. Fact 8. Author Mika Waltari walked out mid-screening. Mika Waltari, the celebrated Finnish author who wrote the original novel The Egyptian, attended the film's premiere but was so deeply disappointed with Hollywood's adaptation of his work that he walked out in the middle of the screening. This dramatic exit spoke volumes about how far the movie had strayed from his literary vision, especially considering that Waltari's novel was regarded as one of the greatest books in Finnish literary history and had been an international bestseller. Waltari had written The Egyptian in 1945 during a burst of creative inspiration that lasted only 3.5 months, drawing on 20 years of research about ancient Egypt and his experiences during World War II. The novel was praised for its historical accuracy, philosophical depth, and complex exploration of human nature across the ages, with Egyptologists themselves commending Waltari's attention to detail and authentic depiction of ancient Egyptian life and culture. When Hollywood got hold of the story, however, the studio made significant changes that undermined what Waltari considered the heart of his work. According to critics familiar with both versions, the film watered down the novel's lusty and full-bodied descriptions of violence, sensuality, and intrigue, instead focusing on what one reviewer called the story's slender and unexciting plot elements. Even simple details were changed. The character Nefer had her name shortened to just Nefer, and the film emphasized romantic melodrama over the deeper philosophical themes about the unchanging nature of humanity that Walteri had carefully woven throughout his novel. His decision to leave the premiere mid-showing remains one of the most pointed author rejections of a film adaptation in Hollywood history. Fact 9. Gene Simmons mocked the lead actress. Gene Simmons, one of the most respected actresses in the cast of The Egyptian, reportedly made a cutting joke about Bella Darvi's acting abilities that quickly spread among the cast and crew during production. Simmons joked that Darvi was an actress who never was, a clever but cruel pun that played on Darvi's character named Nefer while suggesting she had never really been an actress at all and never would be. This behind-the-scenes mockery revealed the tension on set regarding Darvi's casting, as many of the professional actors were frustrated that someone with essentially no acting experience had been given such a prominent role purely because of her relationship with producer Darryl F. Zanuck. Simmons herself was an Oscar-nominated actress who had already proven her talents in films like Hamlet and was making her fourth and final movie alongside Victor Mature. So she had the professional credibility to recognize that Darvi was clearly out of her depth in the production. The joke also reflected what many cast members were thinking, but not saying openly, which was that having an inexperienced actress in a major role was affecting the quality of the entire film. According to reports, during the script read-through before filming began, even Marlon Brando immediately disliked Darvi at first sight, and other cast members laughed along with Simmons about her lack of talent. When the film was released, critics echoed these sentiments in their reviews, with Variety commenting that Darvi contributed little more than an attractive figure, and the New York Times noting that she did not succeed convincingly in her role, proving that Simmons' harsh assessment had been accurate all along. Fact 10. Two actors had their voices dubbed. Mike Mazurki and Leo Gordon, two character actors who appeared in The Egyptian, had their voices completely replaced by other actors in post-production because the studio felt their natural speaking voices sounded too much like they belonged on American streets rather than in ancient Egypt. The decision to dub their dialogue was made specifically to achieve what the production team considered a more classical and refined quality that would be appropriate for characters living 33 centuries ago. This dubbing choice reflected Hollywood's approach to historical epics in the 1950s, where studios believed that ancient civilizations should sound dignified and formal, even though there was obviously no way to know what ancient Egyptians actually sounded like. Mike Mazurki, who played the foreman at the House of Death, was a former professional wrestler turned actor, known for his distinctive, deep, gravelly voice that had become his trademark in film noir and crime pictures. Leo Gordon was similarly typecast as a tough guy character actor whose rough-edged vocal quality worked perfectly for westerns and crime dramas, but apparently didn't fit the studio's vision for ancient Egyptian characters. The irony of this decision is that the film already featured a cast with wildly different accents. British actors like Michael Wilding and Edmund Purdom speaking with refined English accents, Bella Darvi speaking with a heavy French accent that made her difficult to understand, and various American actors using their natural voices. Adding two more authentic American voices into this already eclectic mix would hardly have been noticeable, but the studio's commitment to a certain artificial sense of dignity and formality for the ancient world meant that Mazurki and Gordon's performances were altered without their distinctive vocal qualities. Fact 11. Gene Tierney's fiancée served as consultant. Prince Ali Khan served as a consultant during the filming of The Egyptian, which created the unusual situation of having royalty working behind the scenes on a Hollywood production while simultaneously being engaged to one of the film's stars, Gene Tierney. This arrangement allowed the prince and the actress to spend time together during the production while he contributed his knowledge and perspective to the authenticity of the film. Prince Ali Khan was the son of Aga Khan III, the leader of millions of Ismaili Muslims worldwide, making him genuine royalty rather than just a titled aristocrat. He had become romantically involved with Jean Tierney while filming Personal Affair in Europe, and they became engaged in 1952 while Khan was going through a divorce from his previous wife, the famous actress Rita Hayworth. Their relationship had attracted intense media attention because it represented a romance between Hollywood glamour and international royalty. Having Prince Ali Khan on set as a consultant brought an interesting dynamic to the production, as his background included extensive travel throughout the Middle East and Egypt on behalf of his father's charitable work, giving him genuine cultural knowledge that could inform the filmmakers about the region and its history. However, their marriage plans would ultimately fall apart due to fierce opposition from Khan's father, who disapproved of his son marrying another Hollywood actress after the highly publicized failure of his marriage to Hayworth. Despite the engagement ending, the time they spent together during the production of The Egyptian remains a unique footnote in Hollywood history, where royal expertise and romantic partnership intersected on a major film set. Fact 12. Kirk Douglas abandoned ship for Disney. Kirk Douglas was originally announced as part of The Egyptian's cast alongside Marlon Brando in November of 1953. But he made the smart decision to leave the troubled production and instead signed on to make 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for Walt Disney, a choice that proved to be extraordinarily fortunate for his career. While The Egyptian struggled with casting chaos and behind-the-scenes drama, Douglas found himself in one of the biggest box office hits of 1954. Douglas had been set to play a supporting role in The Egyptian when the project still looked like a prestige production with major star power attached. But as problems began mounting with the casting and production delays, he recognized that the film was heading for trouble and managed to extricate himself from his commitment. His role in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as the charismatic harpooner Ned Land showcased his talents in a well-made adventure film that appealed to audiences of all ages and became one of Disney's most successful live-action productions. The contrast between the two films couldn't have been more stark when they were both released in 1954. The Egyptian received mixed reviews and disappointed at the box office, failing to recoup its substantial production costs and earning a reputation as the first CinemaScope film to be a commercial flop. Meanwhile, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was both a critical and commercial success, earning positive reviews for its special effects, performances, and storytelling while becoming one of the highest-grossing films of the year. Douglas's instinct to jump ship from The Egyptian to the Disney production demonstrated the kind of career savvy that helped establish him as one of Hollywood's most enduring stars. Fact 13. Brando's psychiatrist backed his excuse. When Marlon Brando abandoned The Egyptian just before filming was scheduled to begin, he publicly claimed that he was unable to play his part due to mental strain and overwork, and remarkably, his psychiatrist provided professional support backing up these claims. This medical endorsement gave Brando's excuse an air of legitimacy that made it harder for 20th Century Fox to challenge his departure, even though modern sources reveal that the real reasons for his exit had nothing to do with his mental health. The involvement of Brando's psychiatrist was particularly significant in the 1950s, when mental health was taken very seriously in legal and professional contexts, but was also less well understood than it is today. Having a licensed medical professional confirm that Brando needed psychiatric care provided him with substantial protection against the studio's legal threats, as Fox would have faced public relations problems if they were seen as forcing a mentally unwell actor to work against his doctor's recommendations. In reality, Brando simply hated everything about the project. He found the script unsatisfying, couldn't stand working with director Michael Curtis, and especially despised his co-star Bella Darby, who had been cast because of her relationship with producer Daryl Zanuck rather than her acting ability. Brando's agent later confirmed these were the true reasons for his departure, telling Zanuck directly that Brando didn't like the director, didn't like the role, and couldn't stand Darby. The psychiatrist's backing allowed Brando to exit the production with a medical excuse rather than having to publicly state these harsh truths, though it didn't prevent Fox from filing a $2 million lawsuit that was eventually settled when Brando agreed to make another film for the studio. Fact 14. Jean Peters' publicity materials were wasted. Jean Peters was originally cast in The Egyptian alongside Marlon Brando and was part of the initial publicity campaign for the film, but when she was replaced by Gene Simmons in January of 1954, the studio had already printed promotional materials featuring her name and image. According to production records, only the right half of these already printed publicity materials had to be changed to reflect the casting swap, which reveals how the studio was making major decisions on the fly while trying to keep the troubled production moving forward. This detail about only needing to change half of the publicity materials suggests that the studio's marketing department had designed their promotional posters and advertisements with a split layout, possibly featuring male actors on one side and female actors on the other, or perhaps showing different characters in separate sections. The fact that they could simply replace one half while keeping the rest of the materials intact indicates that the studio was aware enough of the production's instability to design their publicity in a way that would allow for last-minute changes without having to scrap everything and start over. The replacement of Peters with Simmons happened during the same chaotic period when the production was dealing with Marlon Brando's departure, suggesting that the studio was scrambling to salvage the project by bringing in more reliable or prestigious talent. Gene Simmons was already an Oscar-nominated actress with a strong reputation, while Jean Peters was a contract player at Fox who hadn't achieved the same level of recognition. The switch reflected the studio's attempt to shore up the film's credibility after losing Brando, even if it meant wasting money on publicity materials that had to be partially redone at the last minute. Fact 15. Future comedian had a childhood role. Harry Shearer, who would go on to become one of the most recognizable voice actors in television history, appeared in The Egyptian as an 11-year-old child in a small bit part during the production. At the time, Shearer was just another child actor working in Hollywood films, with no indication that he would eventually become famous for voicing dozens of characters on The Simpsons, including Mr. Burns, Ned Flanders, Principal Skinner, and many others who have become iconic parts of American pop culture. Shearer's appearance in The Egyptian was part of his early career as a child performer in the 1950s, and like many young actors of that era, he took whatever small roles were available in major studio productions. The film featured numerous extras and bit players to populate the crowd scenes and background action required for an epic set in ancient Egypt, and the 11-year-old Shearer was one of many performers filling out these scenes to create the sense of a bustling ancient civilization. What makes this casting particularly interesting in retrospect is that Shearer would later become known for his sharp satirical comedy and his work with the mockumentary band Spinal Tap, where he played bassist Derek Smalls in the cult classic film This Is Spinal Tap. The contrast between his brief, uncredited childhood, appearance in a lavish historical epic, and his later career as a comedic performer who often satirized Hollywood pretensions and excesses creates an amusing full-circle moment. Shearer's extensive career in entertainment, spanning more than 7 decades from his childhood roles through his ongoing work on The Simpsons, makes his early appearance in The Egyptian a fascinating footnote in both the film's history and his own remarkable journey through show business.